Good evening, guys. Gentlemen. Gentlemen to bed, for we rise at daybreak. Anybody see, what's the name of it? The Trip with Steve Coogan. Gentlemen to bed, for we rise at daybreak. They never say, when is daybreak exactly? They never say the exact time. Gentlemen to bed, for we rise at 9:30. I love that pair. They're just driving around the English countryside, going to restaurants, fucking goofing off in the car. Gentlemen to bed. We rise at, what time's the battle again? 8:30 for 9. For we rise at 8:30 for 9. How are you guys? I just lit up this cigar. This is one of these El Cobres, courtesy of a wonderful supporter of the channel. Thank you, sir. You know who you are. I never check if you want me to say your name or not, so I don't want to do that. How is everyone? Who's in the room? I believe Paul Thorpe was trying to make a comment. I know he was, because it came up here in my StreamYard thing, but apparently it's not coming up on what's its face directly on YouTube. I'm trying to check here. Sorry guys, I'm a little distracted. It's kind of weird. It's not coming up on YouTube, but it's definitely coming up here. Tonight we will be talking about Paul, neo-fascists in Britain, of which I think it's pretty clear that he is one. Don't know why no one actually ever really called it. Mind you, I have a feeling the BBC called it. And that was the reason he was not on that show. They were probably like, fuck, thanks for the info about the watches. We don't need to hear your rant about immigrants. So I don't know why he's not coming up on the thing. Anyway, his comment is incendiary. I'll actually read it in a minute because some people have been trying to attack me on that point, and I'm happy to repudiate. I welcome attacks. I welcome those. I welcome accusations and attacks. Anyone who feels like doing so is welcome. At your own risk. Of course. And I'm going to have some cool guests on tonight. I am Blakely. Will be joining us a little later. Amazing, hilarious, and fun. And actually, we're going to talk about American Irish and Irish and what's the difference, things like that. So that should be fun. Before that, we're going to have a chap that you guys have seen a couple of times before already in Love, who unfortunately has to go by a pseudonym, and he needs his identity protected. Goes by the name of John. You all know. A little bit about John, but not too much. As much as I can do. Jesus, already 900 in the room. What's going on? You guys always love a little bit of scandal. It's always the way, isn't it? Fucking hell, what's going on, guys? You got nothing to do on a Saturday? So we'll be talking about, we might cover a little bit of the immigration thing because our John friend happens to know a lot about it. Has a lot of experience with it on the American side of things, of course. But still, we'll talk about other stuff. Keep it interesting. Keep it spicy on a Friday night. Before I get to Paul's comment, which I will read verbatim, I'll actually pull her up on the screen so you can see. We have Nathaniel in the room, $5, super sticker. How are you, man? Good to see you. Thank you for the little super sticker. Al Benedetti is a new member. Wow. I thought you were already a member, man. Did you have to become a member? Was there some issue? Dean is a member for 1 month. What do you think of the new Tudor Chrono Pink? I think it's interesting. At first, I thought it was one for the ladies, but it turns out it's a soccer thing, Miami soccer club thing. Beckham, David Beckham. I guess that's the color that they wear. Jesus, the numbers. It's last week was poor, and the week before that with Blakely, it was crazy like this. What's going on, guys? I guess it depends what's on TV at the time, right? Nothing good to watch on TV, so turn on the scruffy Irish drunk. Deals with, says Joe Monk's creative. Deal with, that means good day or good evening or hello. It's a greeting in Irish. Zeus, fascist. Do you know what's happening in the UK? Yeah, the entire country's on fire, right? I think somebody's fiddling with my viewers because this is a bit heavy. I think there might be some people messing with me head. That's my feeling. Mind you, Blakely put it on her Instagram. Okay, that maybe her crowd have come over too. Got it. Welcome, everybody. New viewers. Free Palestine. Yeah, I think that must be it. Don't you know what's happening in the UK? It's okay for you in your poncy ivory tower getting pissed on overpriced wine. Actually, the wine here is underpriced. It's one good reason to live in Italy. Wine is actually very affordable in this country. You need a reality check, mate. Revealing his identity, his nationality, because I'm a mate. You need a reality check, mate. I know what some people think is happening in the UK. Multiculturalism. It's whether you have a problem with it or not that defines you. Not whether it's happening or not. Des Ferris, 10 books. There's 1,500 in the room. There's a few more than that now, man. Upvote and share the love. The upvote thing is right here, guys. If you're here to see Blakely, she'll be on in about 50 minutes, okay? It's going to be an interesting chat up until then, but if, I won't be insulted if you bow out for a little bit because you just want to see her. Sorry. Got to get that right. I'm relearning everything, guys. Danny, why have you banned Paul Thorpe? I didn't, from what I know. Paul's been in my chats many times before. I think something's up. His comment is right here, so that shows you. I'll be able to put it up right now in a minute, just in case you don't believe me. And something tells me you don't. John Rodzinski, 5 Australian dollars, I believe. Mr. Ocean, can you see a reason why my Rolex AD, who sold me a new Air King, didn't give me the manual but an extra green tag? That's very strange. Did they lose the manual? Did you ask for the manual? You can buy a manual for that thing pretty easy on eBay, man. I was having a little bit of a roll up tonight. Well, I think I showed you guys this one last week. It's this Silvio Grasso. Really nice and quite affordable, contrary to what our friend Zeus seems to think. Sam Katz. Hell yeah. Those poor people. God damn it. So, yes, let me get straight to this. And this is really getting in at the deep end. Paul's obviously feeling a tad attacked. And that's fine by me because he had a fucking wild, hard right neo-fascist on his channel the other day. It's his right to do that. He can do whatever he wants. But if there was any doubt about the association with the hard right and the neo-fascist party, EDL is clearly a neo-fascist party. It's been called that by many, many times. If there's any doubts of the affiliation, or at least the love for that party, all those doubts have now been removed, I think. Here is the thing. Paul Thorpe, when asked if he would condemn Hamas after October 7th massacre, Mahdi replied, absolutely. They didn't do their job well enough. There's real fascism for you, blatant and undisputable. I believe the word is indisputable. I absolutely condemn them because the job was not done well enough. What is meant by that, of course, is that the job clearly, as clarified by Hamas later as well, was to pick up hostages. That was their mission. Hostages that would then be used as bargaining chips to help free some of the 10,000 plus languishing in Israeli prisons currently, many of whom are children, and many of whom remain in there without charge. It's a thing called, what's it called? Administrative detention, I believe they call it, where they don't actually have to charge the person, they can hold them. In all modern industrialized countries, we have a thing called habeas corpus. If you're not charged within a certain time, usually it's 48 hours to 72 hours, you're let go. The British were some of the first to change that. They came out with a thing called the Prevention of Terrorism Act in 1980, where they could hold and interrogate someone who they believed, they had reason to believe was perhaps a terrorist, IRA, namely, for up to 7 days, flying in the face of the ancient rule of habeas corpus. And of course, there's a famous story about the Guildford Four, who were wrongly convicted of a bombing because they were held for 7 days and they weren't allowed to sleep in anything or eat. And they were forced into a signed confession. That is now no longer disputable, because when it was brought back to court 15 years later, after it sat in British prison for nearly 16 years, the case was thrown out. They didn't get any justice. And Jerry, the main fella, his father died in prison. Giuseppe died in prison with him during those 15 years. Really brutal. Well, the Israelis went, hold my beer. They can hold someone for 6 months. And when the 6 months is about to expire, they just renew it. And there are people in Gaza who haven't seen their sister, their brother, their parents for years because they're being held under administrative detention, 10,000 plus. The goal of Hamas on October 7th was to collect hostages, not to shoot people in porta potties, not to hold people in their home and terrorize them and use one of the phones to call their parents on WhatsApp and various other horrible things. There were no beheaded babies. There was no baby in an oven. There was no pregnant woman with her baby cut out of her. They were complete lies now. That's all been debunked. The New York Times now is all backpedaling like a cheap politician on that one, hoping to avoid droves of protesters outside calling for the resignation of the CEO there. Her name escapes me right now. But there certainly was things that were not part of the fucking plan. And if I was someone running Hamas, if I was a commander in Hamas, those fucking guys who did that extra stuff, like shooting porta potties. No one was told to go shoot porta potties at a fucking rave. Not good enough. So yes, I condemn Hamas because the job was not done properly. Anything outside the actual plan, if you do that in the US military, you get fucking court-martialed. Now, I know what Paul thinks I meant by that, because Paul knows as much about geopolitics as a fucking 7-year-old knows, and just assumes I mean, oh, they didn't kill enough people, or whatever fucking myopic, childish nonsense he's trying to apply to it. But of course, that's not what I meant at all. Later, Hamas released they made an announcement about it and their reasons for doing it and the mistakes made, and they include those mistakes in those things. Okay, yeah, well, at least they admit their mistakes. It's more than I can say for the fucking IOF. But naturally, that message is being quashed as much as possible in the Western world. So there you are. Yes, I do condemn Hamas for more accurate reasons than anyone else might. If you condemn Hamas because of 40 beheaded babies, I'm afraid you're condemning them for something that never actually happened. And it's been common knowledge. Even the White House withdrew that statement after 900-year-old Biden went out and said, I saw the pictures. He didn't have to add that lie to that whole thing. He could have just gone with what he was told. Anyway, there it is. So let's bring in our guest. You know him as John. He works for the US government. He actually is Israeli and Russian. And we're going to talk a little bit about his experience on borders and stuff like that. And I'll try and catch up on some of the comments in the chat here. John,
hello. Hey, good evening.
How are you, man?
I'm good. I feel like I'm about to hold a ladder while you swing a baseball bat at a hornet's nest. So I'll do my best to keep it steady.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What's going on? You're wearing your date just tonight, right?
I am. Brand new purchase. I think it's a couple months now down. Pretty much my daily. Mm-hmm. So it's been nice.
Sorry, I'm just going to address
this
real quick.
Go through the chats.
Paul is saying, I bottled out of playing the clip. If he's talking about the clip of me saying, yes, I condemn Hamas because the job wasn't done properly. Or let me go back to the actual quote. I have to address it, sorry. Because this motherfucker isn't going to let go. But I'll retaliate, don't you worry. They didn't do their job well enough is exactly what I said. And I just said it again tonight. So we don't need to play any clip because there isn't any extra on any clip. Thank you, Paul.
This will be the new clip.
Yeah, there it is. They can use this one. Don't shoot porta potties, guys. Grab some hostages, treat them nicely, bring them back. That was the mission. So you have some experience on border control, seeing as the subject of immigrants and so on is in the air at the moment. Um, how many years did you do that for? Can I
So
ask
I
that?
yeah, yeah. So I spent 10 years in the US Border Patrol,
Hmm.
um, both on the southern border and the northern border. A lot of people will be shocked to know that there's Border Patrol agents on the US Canadian border as well as the US Mexico border. But
Yeah, we always
um,
think of Mexico. That's
yeah,
the first one that comes to mind.
everybody thinks of Mexico, but Canada has its own unique, believe it or not, threats. There are some operational concerns there, but yeah, I spent 10 years mostly in Texas, both the very southern portion of Texas, Brownsville, McAllen area, as well as West Texas, Del Rio, Texas, which is where is kind of the epicenter right now for what's going on. Did everything from regular everyday border patrol agent operations to intelligence, then special operations, and then promoted up to doing program management and some other agency work. So uh, I don't want to say I'm an expert because I think expertise is difficult to obtain in any subject, but I do have practical experience and obviously operational experience doing that type of work. So I've seen it from all sides. And obviously, as an immigrant
Hmm.
myself, I understand the plight of the very people that we were interdicting. Uh, so it's not something that's lost on me. But that being said, my position is kind of paradoxical in that sense, or at best nuanced. So
Right.
yeah, so that's been my experience. Obviously, I've moved on since then to I don't want to say bigger and better things, but definitely a little more esoteric things.
Right. I mean, you must have seen some crazy stuff, to put it
Yeah.
really simply.
Well, so the big change when I was there between 2008 and 2012, 14, the posture was different because people didn't want to be apprehended. So there was a lot of what you would consider in traditional law enforcement typical work. People are being chased because they don't want to be caught.
Yeah.
The asylum system that's currently in place and that whole debacle that's going on the southern border right now was not the case at the time because the enforcement posture was much more aggressive. When people got arrested, they would be processed and either immediately sent back to Mexico, or if they were not Mexican nationals, they would be sent to jail temporarily and then would have an immigration hearing and then repatriated back to whatever country they came from. Whereas now the asylum claims are being, I don't want to say expedited, but they're being processed on a much broader scale than they were. So people that would have never been eligible for asylum in 2008 are now applying for asylum under the current administration. So
Uh-huh.
it's basically just been overwhelming the system. So now people are just not even trying to avoid detection, let alone apprehension. They're turning themselves into border patrol agents, and those are the scenes of chaos that you're seeing unfolding on the southern border today. So yeah, everything from you know tracking groups for 8 to 10 miles through the King Ranch,
Jeez.
shootings, everything. So it was probably the most fun I've ever had in my line of work. I still keep the green uniform in a bin in my basement just in case they call me back.
Just in case.
Just in case they call me back. And luckily, I still fit in it, so that's also a good sign. I'm in my 40s now, but I don't know if my knees could take it, but at least I still fit the part. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I hate to say that it was fun, but just being honest, it was a lot of fun because that's what people join the border patrol or the military for, is that field experience and actually going out there and kind of being a modern day cowboy, I guess is the best way to put it.
Did you observe all that? Remember all of those scandals where little kids were being separated from their parents and all of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so I was already out of uh, the border patrol at that time, and again, there's a
Is that
lot
still
of
hap- is that still happening?
so There's a lot to dissect there. And again, I don't know how much you want to get into this. Obviously, we could do an entire podcast on this, but the family
Sure.
separation thing was, again, there's truth to it, and then there's hyperbole that got
Right.
spun up out of control. Um, Part of the issue was that it was what they were calling unaccompanied minors. So
Mm.
if a minor, somebody under the age of 18, crossed the border with a non-biological parent, the process was to separate them from the adults. And we would always do this because, again, when you're apprehending a group of people on the border, it's a mixture of adults, women, children. And then a lot of times, the guide, if the guide that was actually part of the smuggling organization that was transporting them across wasn't able to get away before the group was apprehended,
Hmm.
their secondary course of action was to blend into the group and pretend to be one of the migrants because
Wow.
smuggling is a felony. So if they were detected as a smuggler, they were facing criminal charges where the group would not face criminal charges. The group would only get administrative immigration charges and simply be removed from the country. So the reason we separated children from adults that were not their parents is to avoid, obviously, physical abuse, sexual abuse, or any kind of manipulation, coercion, extortion, or any kind of extortion, which would happen. So
Right.
that policy played out because what would happen is people would send their children first into the US with a friend or a relative or somebody else, and then they would piggyback and follow them to the US once the child made it through across. So we were apprehending everybody from just literally just children walking by themselves across the border to a mixture of adults and kids who were not related. So the policy for the safety of the children was to separate them. Now that obviously
Mm.
became political firestorm because the thing that people were seeing as kids in cages and we're throwing kids in prison. But it's, again, there's so much interwoven into that. The border patrol is not equipped for long-term detention. The border patrol apprehends people, they send them back, and they're not equipped to process hundreds of people at the same time. And they also don't do long-term detention. That's what Immigration Customs Enforcement is for, which is what they call ICE. So
Yeah.
ICE is that agency that does deportations and long-term housing, and that's what you were seeing at the time with the crisis of all those unaccompanied minors. These border patrol stations that are designed to hold maybe 30 to 100 people were getting 400 people at the same time. So
Yeah.
they were having to build temporary shelters and all this. So it was just overwhelming the system. And that's what you were seeing, that chaos unfolding. But Border Patrol obviously got blamed as the more, uh, that primary agency that you see on the news.
And what do you see any disparity, any difference between what's happening in Europe? I just mentioned it. You probably noticed because you watched my Ireland video, I believe, earlier today. And in there, I do a luncheon with Dave Moore, one of the biggest personalities on radio in Ireland at the moment. He doesn't talk politics much. He's more of an entertainer. Uh, there's another guy called Joe something or other, that does a lot more of the political kind of stuff. Um, but we are talking about that kind of thing where, Ireland, Dublin is becoming multicultural, quite like London did or has been for years and decades at this point. Um, because, of course, war torn countries and so on in North Africa, Syria, Palestine, etc., Ukraine, and so on. There's an influx. And of course, Ireland now being a kind of a wealthy country, a very wealthy country, one of the wealthiest in the world per capita. Clearly, a lot of people are happy to go there because wealth means opportunity. It's the same reason people went to the United States for such a long time, and London as well. Um, do you see any kind of parallels happening from your American perspective between those two different things? I'm sure it's very, very different because you guys are literally connected to Mexico and Canada for all those
That's right. Don't
Canucks that are
forget,
coming over, right? But
don't forget Canada.
right, what a huge threat!
Yeah.
They're sick and tired of their socialized healthcare, their free healthcare. They want to come over and
Well,
they want to come over and pay for it. But do you see any parallels between what's happening in Europe? Because it's beginning to. There was a riot in Dublin, and that hasn't happened in a long time. The last riots that were in Dublin were against the Brits, and that was 100 years previous. So it was pretty crazy to see a bus burning on O'Connell Street, on O'Connell Bridge, practically in Dublin after there was an incident. And Conor McGregor, of all spokespeople, my God, was out there going, "Oh, we are at war with the immigrants," and so on. It's just the most shameful moment in recent Irish history, I would say. Um, do you see any parallels? Sorry, I'll keep
Yeah,
expanding the
no, no, no.
question.
So,
Mhm.
a couple things to frame this, and I think this applies to a lot of conversations. And the first thing I wanted to kind of orient people towards is these sort of things are very complicated, these topics, these areas of discussion. And one of the things I try to make people aware of is their level of knowledge of any subject. And it applies to immigration, this applies to science, politics. There is your entry level is just your awareness. And that's where I think a lot of people exist. They're just aware of something, they know more or less generalities. Then there is sort of a level of understanding where you may know more details, you may have a point of view that's supported by some facts. And then there's genuine expertise. And I
Yeah,
think in this immigration space, very few people occupy that expertise space because to be an expert in something, you pretty much have to devote your life to it. And
right.
so what happens is a lot of people are getting their information from pseudo experts and pseudo intellectuals who are just talking. They're just extemporaneously speaking about something that's going on, and they're not really critical of one side or the other. Um, that being said, I think that people can be right for the wrong reasons. And
Hmm,
I think there's a lot of that going on. There is a distinction to be made between legal immigration and illegal immigration. I
certainly.
think that's definitely a distinction that needs to be made. Obviously, that's a contentious point in the United States narrative. I don't know how that works on the European side. But the other thing I want to always kind of frame to people is it's a good thing that your country is worth immigrating to.
Yes.
That's something that people need to consider. So when millions of people are coming into the United States every year through both legal and illegal avenues, they're not meeting people going the other direction.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. That's a net positive for the country. So the fact that people are coming to the UK, coming to Italy, coming to France, coming to the United States, that's a good thing. Now, does that need to be controlled? Yes, because
Uh-huh.
there needs to be a mechanism to formalize the flow of people back and forth. That you cannot have completely uncontrolled, unchecked immigration. And there's two reasons for that. One, it destabilizes the host country. And you have these far right reactions to this, which to some extent can be emotionally justifiable. They may not be factually accurate, but they are emotionally justifiable, which is where a lot of people operate, is in that emotional truth. It feels right, so therefore it must be right.
Yeah.
And the idea that these processes are not well controlled in some countries, or that faucet is not maybe turned in the right direction where it's just a flow, people feel overwhelmed. And the second part of that is the assimilation of the immigrant population. It's not beneficial to the immigrant population if they feel like the outsider, if they feel like the outgroup. So
Mm.
controlled immigration mitigates that to some extent, where people have a chance to arrive in a country, they feel welcome, they're not a overwhelming minority, it's slow, there's a community established, and we all assimilate. I mean, I can use you as a prime example. Although you're not Italian by birth,
Yes.
you have assimilated to Italian culture, you speak the language, you adhere to the norms and standards of Italy,
Hmm.
even though you don't consider yourself a Italian by birth. But that being said, the other distinction is that patriotism versus nationalism. And
Yeah.
this is where we lose the plot, because I equate the difference between nationalism and patriotism the same way that somebody can be born wealthy or acquire wealth through hard work. So what I've seen from the immigrant community in the US, at least, is they are some of the most patriotic people you will ever meet.
Hmm.
One of the dates that pretty much every immigrant you run into in the United States will remember is the date that they became a US citizen.
Hmm.
So they are choosing to live in the United States. And that to me is a much more clear form of patriotism than somebody who just won the genetic lottery and happened to be born here. So the nationalism to me, I always look at it with a suspect eye because you didn't earn that. You were born in the United States, and that's great. And you're very lucky to have done that. But you did not do anything to deserve that. You just happened to be born at the right place at the right time. The people that
Your
have,
your parents fucked there. That's what it
yeah,
comes down to.
your that's a much more succinct way to put it. Yeah, correct. Yeah, your parents had sex in the right country, and you were born in the right hospital.
Yeah.
And the
Excellent
people
skills.
and the people that came to that same nation, they typically had to go through a hell of a lot more to make that happen.
Right.
So I find that uh, that unearned feeling of accomplishment, where it's this us versus them, and we're protecting our way of life and our nation. It's like, well, those people that are working in the immigrant community, starting businesses and contributing to the society and sending their kids to school and taking pride in their country, they're just as entitled to feel as British or American or Italian as the people that were born there. And so that
Yeah.
multiculturalism does work, but obviously, if it's driven to an extreme where there's just an open border and everyone can come and go as they please, that creates anarchy. Whereas the opposite side of that, where it's just a lockdown and a completely homogenous society, that's also not a good thing. So the dial needs to be set somewhere in the middle to keep it sane. But
Yeah.
again, this is where people on the far right and the far left need to step away from the keyboard and look at the reality. You can't have a completely closed society, but you also can't have a completely open border. So the fact that far right extreme views are becoming more popular, part of the problem is because the people on the left are not identifying the problem and dealing with it accordingly,
Hmm.
and they're not implementing sane immigration policies. And every conversation that begins with that topic, you're accused of being a fascist and a xenophobe, and how dare you, you're racist. So that drives people to the right. And you see that with the election of Donald Trump and potentially his secondary term here coming up in a couple months.
Hmm.
It's driven by that holier than thou attitude that a lot of people on the left have. So they're playing into that hand, and
Right.
it's important for people on the far left to meet in the middle and people on the right to meet in the middle rather than being pushed to those extremes.
Yeah. I'm like, it's very funny to me to watch all this stuff because it's I think I certainly think in the United Kingdom, and now probably happening in Ireland for sure, just on a very small scale, on a smaller scale than Britain. I think, a lot of it is just not being worldly, not knowing other cultures, not knowing other languages, and not being comfortable with the new stuff. A lot of these people, I think, coming over from maybe Syria, so on, are carrying with them their culture, their religion, their methodical ways of living, and their identity. They're bringing their burqa, they're bringing their praying mat, and so on. I think a lot of English in particular are having a knee jerk reaction to it. I would say probably on the lower end of that bunch, people I would consider to be neo fascist, because to a certain degree, England, especially, has been a multicultural country for a long time. This is the country, like, what is it to be English, really? You drive a German car to an Irish pub to drink Belgian beer, to pick up a Indian curry on your way home, to sit on a Swedish sofa, to watch a Japanese television and look at American shows, and all the while be suspicious of something foreign or anything foreign.
Yeah.
You know, it. Britain has some of the best Indian food in the world. Manchester is very famous for it, and Brick Lane, and so on. There's an amazing phenomena that happens. I don't know if you're aware of this as an American, Russian, Israeli American, whatever. I think American first, right?
I need to get another passport here. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, I there's a funny thing that happens. Like, as you know, I was 20 years in New York. If you're on the phone with an African American, you can tell. You can tell if they're African American over the phone in many, many cases.
How dare you?
I know, isn't that terrible? It's a thing a lot of people talk about, and I don't think I'm overstepping. It's a sound. It's a bit
Yeah.
like being able to identify a gender over the phone, which I suppose
Yeah.
is getting risque at this point as
Yeah.
well.
That ladder is starting to shake.
That's
Ocean.
loud. Yeah, that's shaking
I'm
for
getting I'm
sure.
getting stung.
Yeah, I know. I keep hitting it,
No,
but
absolutely.
in Britain that doesn't happen. There's a famous film, a brilliant film by a director called Mike Leigh, uh, called Secrets and Lies. It's a magnificent film. It won a lot of awards, and it tells a beautiful story of a woman, working class woman, who had to give up her baby when she was very young. She had a baby very, very young, and that baby grows up, and that baby has whole new parents, was adopted and everything, and those parents actually pass away. That's how the film opens, and she feels a need to go look for her paternal mother, but she's black and her paternal mother is white. And when they first speak on the phone, there's no, the paternal mother, obviously she's very distraught and she's in a terrible place in her life and stuff, and she's not ready for this. She hasn't thought about this person in 30 years. But they go to meet. They speak a little bit on the phone. They go to meet, and they pass one another because the paternal mother has no idea that she actually gave birth to a black baby. It's a very interesting story. It's a magnificent, heartwarming story. Anybody who hasn't seen it, Secrets and Lies, it's a beautiful film. All of Mike Leigh's films, Vera Drake, um, Naked. There's a lot of great Mike Leigh films. And he mainly talks about the working class in England. But what that shows to me is that it truly is a multicultural country, even maybe more than the United States in many ways. I think, United States is definitely a melting pot. And I was in New York for 20 years. It's an extreme melting pot. But at the same time, people are also very proud to have their own area. There's the Irish area, and then there's the Chinatown, and there's little Brazil, and they kind of want to hang on to their original identity in a way as well. They don't want to let that go too much either, because it's fun, because it's nice, and because they feel a certain connection with their homeland. United Kingdom, and now slowly, as you saw Dave Moore talking in my Ireland video, is slowly becoming a different way that an Irish guy can be. I showed one of our great rock legends in that video. It was Phil Lynott, and I'm
Yeah.
talking in the 1970s and
Yeah.
80s.
Not the
Phil
most
Lynott is
progressive time.
right. I think it shocks a lot of people to think, our hero, our rock hero for years before Bono was anything, was a black man with an afro, and he's our legend. He's our king, and we didn't think anything of it. He used to describe himself as being, well, the Irish already like black. They like the pint of Guinness. So
Yeah.
I'm that. Um, do you think there's a resistance happening? Do you think racism is plays any part in the resistance against? I mean, certainly anti-Islamists like Tommy Robinson,
Yeah.
fools like that, are just extremely ardent anti-Islam. They fucking know nothing about it. But do you think that racism plays a part in that kind of resistance? The
I think,
Trumpsters and so on.
yeah, so I think there's two things going on. I always say that racism is simply a combination of tribalism and ignorance, and
Hmm.
that's where you get racism.
Right.
But the other factors, I think there's just a push-pull factor that's going on between our primitive biology and tribalism, and obviously living in a multiracial, multi-ethnic world because we've been pushed together through technology and travel and this availability of going around. And there's that famous E.O. Wilson quote, "We are bound by prehistoric biology, medieval institutions, and godlike technology."
Hmm.
So this is that, paradox that we're living in. We're prehistoric apes with these medieval institutions, but we have this access to this godlike technology, and those factors are kind of working against each other to some degree. So while you recognize people as different through external characteristics, hopefully you have evolved past that initial, surprise signal that's going to your brain, and you get to know the person and you realize, well, you know what, we actually have a lot more in common. You might like the same sport, you might like the same food, and
Yeah.
so you get past that a little bit easier. But to some extent, it's almost like a defense mechanism that's built into us, because somebody different than you may be an enemy. It may be a hostile tribe.
Yeah.
So you're almost pre-programmed to react that way. Obviously, through evolution of language, hopefully most people have gotten past that point. But this is where these stories that are amplified uh, are causing so much damage. Because, yes, is it true that immigrants commit crime? Absolutely. Is it true that
Mhm.
native populations also commit crime? Absolutely. So
Certainly.
it just depends on what you hear. And this is part of the uh, kind of insidious effect of technology mixed with propaganda. So, for example, I don't know if you've heard this. Tucker Carlson recently said in an interview that he was considering being Trump's vice president if Trump runs
Oh,
in
wow.
2024. And he's talked about this. He basically says that he feels like he'd be a good VP because he has political ambitions and he's young and he wants to expand his footprint.
And he
And
knows how to sell Bibles for
he
60
he
bucks a
he
piece.
knows he knows how to be, in the public eye. He obviously is somewhat charismatic. He has a following. So being the vice
Yeah.
president is kind of this natural progression. And even though him and Trump have had disagreements, he feels that he could do a good job as the vice president.
Right.
Now, none of that is true. I just made that up.
Oh, you
But
just made it up.
that illustrates what they call the illusory truth effect. So
You had me. You
be-
had me.
because I said that 3 times, and people are listening to that, and there's a part of their brain that went, "Holy shit, I didn't know that," and they believed it. But now,
That's exactly what you just did to me. Now, listen,
I
you
just
can't.
pulled the veil back, but it shows. Now imagine that signal is amplified to you through your phone, through multiple channels, multiple avenues, multiple people repeating the same thing. So
Mhm.
you now get that story on your phone: immigrant commits murder. And now a friend of yours says, "Did you hear about that immigrant that murdered that woman on the bus?" And that gets built up, built up, built up. And now you're walking around going, "Holy shit, I might get murdered by an immigrant because I'm a woman too." And so
Because no one ever murdered anyone before the immigrants came, correct?
exactly. So those specific things, this is where people will tell you that, "Oh, I don't believe in propaganda. Advertising doesn't work on me." I mean, that's like saying I don't get water in my mouth when I go swimming in the ocean.
Yeah.
It's just you're kidding yourself, because we all have this predisposition to believe what we hear, and we don't like to walk around doubting the world around us. So propaganda plays on that. So if you repeat something subtly several times and it's not this outrageous thing, and
Yeah.
it's more palatable for people, that's how propaganda works. So it's not to say that criminal activity did not happen. And absolutely, there's probably a propensity for young immigrants in specific communities where they have
Certainly.
limited economic opportunities to commit crimes, of course.
Of
But
course.
I'm sure that you growing up in Dublin can cite bad neighborhoods in your city and in your country where young Irish uh, guys are going out committing crimes because they have limited opportunities.
I saw I saw a video last night, some guy in Dublin walking along the Liffey, the main river there, looking at a bunch of dudes just sitting around, black and brown fellas, nothing to do because they don't no jobs, whatever. And he's just like, look at these guys, no respect for our country. And you look at them just hanging around doing nothing. And I wrote to the guy and I was like, you know what, dude? It's fellas like you I was terrified of in Ireland when I was growing up. You grow up in the streets of Ireland in the 80s, you get your head kicked in twice a week. It's just normal. If it's not by your schoolmates, It's by some fuckers on the street. There was a lot of violence just everywhere, and we didn't have any immigrants back then. It was just us fucking killing each other. And I wrote to them saying, you were the kind of, by the things he said and the way he sounded, I judged him. I did it. And I said, you're the kind of dude actually I was terrified of when I was fucking 16 years old walking home. None of these dudes attacked you or approached you or even gave you a nasty look, even though you were filming them. They were minding their own business. But it bothers you that they're there. And it has to be because of the color of their skin. I'm sorry, but it has to be
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah, but that again, I think this is where everybody is susceptible to it. One of the you know things that I've always heard was as a border patrol agent, we were accused of being a very racist organization, and the irony of that is that over 50% of the border patrol is actually Hispanic. So
Yeah.
there's
Sorry,
that
guys, in
term.
the chat. Sorry. I put a pin in that for a second. Sorry, guys. I have to mute Paul because he's going fucking apeshit like a wild 13-year-old in the chat. I'm so sorry. I have to mute him for now. Everyone's obsessed with the clip. I'll get around to the clip later. You're all going to feel very funny because I actually just read the exact clip. You have now 2 or 3 versions of the same clip. But if you want to keep obsessing over the clip, I get it. So we'll get around to that. But for now, I have a guest. I don't know if you noticed. I have a very distinguished guest on my channel, and I'd like to keep up the conversation with him. This is not Paul's channel, and he can't barge his way in. This is not a Tim Wright thing where it's a fucking free for all. We're trying to have a straight up interesting conversation. So I had to mute Paul for now, but I'll unmute him in a bit. Everyone go off and get your knickers in a big twist over that if you feel like doing so. Sorry, John, you were
No,
saying.
that's okay. Yeah, so I think that does play a role on both sides of the aisle because as much as people will talk about the far right being anti-immigrant, that which obviously is there's truth to that. The left is just as susceptible to that with accusations of racism for every police officer that has ever encountered a black person and
Right.
arrested them, or God forbid, had to use their weapon. Those are not all interactions where race is a factor. And so both sides, again, we're all human beings. We all have our biases. We all have our experiences that feed into those biases and those worldviews. And the trick or the mental work that has to be done is not to dismiss those things, but to acknowledge them and work around them and through them to have
Mm-hmm.
basically what we're doing right now, having a conversation.
Yeah.
And that's where those far extremes, and again, when you dissect those people's points of view, you realize that they have a very limited expertise, they have very limited understanding or even awareness of the problem that they're so passionate about. And that's where I think the temperature needs to be brought down. And I typically, when I hear somebody just ranting and raving about something like that, the Alex Jones approach to a topic,
Mm-hmm.
it immediately tells me that this person has not taken the time to really understand the problem and the complexities of it.
Yeah. Um, are things are they getting a hold of things now in the States, or are things getting worse? And is that going to fuel? I mean, I believe that Trump is probably going to be in office next year.
Yeah,
Is that
there's
going to is that fueling that too?
I think that this is, like I said, there's two problems. The first is there is a genuine crisis on the southern border. There is a genuine problem with the immigration system in its current iteration.
Yeah.
The secondary problem is the lack of seriousness from the current administration and the lack of seriousness of moderate, liberal, secular people to handle that problem.
Right.
And the tragedy is that if reasonable liberal people refuse to build and maintain a secure border, fascists will.
Right.
They will do the work because eventually the problem will get so bad that the population will just look to anyone that has a solution. And the first part of that solution is to acknowledge that there's a problem. So when you have rich white educated people proclaiming that any discussion about a sane immigration policy for the United States is analogous to xenophobia and racism,
Mhm.
there's an eye roll in the middle of the country. And now the attention shifts to, okay, you're not even acknowledging that there's a problem. Well, at least this guy is acknowledging that there's a problem.
Yeah.
His solution might not be the best solution, and it
Yeah,
might
but if he
not be.
continues to look the other way, then they think he doesn't care
But yeah, I mean, if
or
at
he
some
doesn't know.
point, yeah, if we're crashing into a mountain, or at least people believe that we're about to crash into a mountain, and the pilot is just saying, no, we're good. Eventually, you're going to get that guy out of the pilot seat and throw somebody else in there that will at least steer the plane. If they
Yeah.
even if they're not able to land it, they will at least steer us away from the mountain. So that's the problem that I'm seeing right now. I think it's starting to happen in places like New York because those migrants or immigrants are being shipped to those major metropolitan cities and they're being overwhelmed. And, that's part of that response from the right to the left to say, okay, you don't believe there's a problem in places like Del Rio, Texas? Here you go. Enjoy. And
Yeah.
so, and again, they're using that very population that they're trying to protect and extend a humanitarian hand to as a political pawn. So it
Mhm.
really does a disservice to the very people you're trying to protect and take care of. So I think the left needs to take this a lot more seriously than they are and have sane immigration policies, at least in the U.S. I don't know how much of that applies to Europe. I don't know how much of that applies to the UK. Again, I'm not an expert or even have any real understanding of the UK immigration process. I know that it's much more strict than the United States. The United States is probably one of the more liberal countries, believe it or not, when it comes to accepting immigrants and accepting people from other places in the world.
Well, that was the whole
So,
idea in the first place, right? Wasn't it? Give me
yeah,
your hunger, give me
that's
your poor, etc. Yeah.
that's why we have that big statue in New York. So, I do see a problem on the horizon for the Democrats because of their refusal to step away from the far left point of view and address the real issues and have a sane immigration policy, work with the Republicans, come up with some sort of solution, and maintain that uh, posture for the next 4, 8, 12 years to show that this can be done. And we have done it in the past. We've had controlled immigration, we've had programs that allowed migrant workers to come in and refugees to come in. It has been done, but right now it's just there's such a political divide now that I think people don't want to acquiesce and lose political standing, even if that means solving the problem.
That's always been the case, man. That's a historical problem. Here in Italy, we have a very similar issue, and it's been around for a very long time. They're very clean cut in this country. You're either a commie or you're a fascist. They're the two sides, fascisti and comunisti. That's fascists are the right and the communists are the left. That's the way they put it. And they would know here because they invented fascism. They've had it around for a long time, and it's still alive and well. And of course, the talking points are very much along the lines of tighter borders, less immigration, less asylum for asylum seekers, etc., etc. Let me show you just an example of where this goes in Italy. This is how far this goes. This is 2 months ago in Rome. You're about to see something scare the shit out of you.
If it's the salute, there we go. Yep.
They know a lot about that stuff. You may notice that it's mostly white, bald heads in the audience. I'm not sure I can see anyone other than that. This is where that shit goes if you're not fucking careful. The Italians take this stuff very, very
Yeah.
seriously, and there's fascist marches and anti-fascist marches over this kind of stuff. I personally, I don't think we live in a world where people don't move around. We don't live in a world where immigration and emigration doesn't exist. It's a survival technique of our species is to move around. This is what we do. Think of the Irish in America. Think of Africans moving around the world. Think of everyone has
Yeah.
arrived from somewhere else. And when there's poverty or there's hunger, people tend to emigrate and move elsewhere and hopefully integrate. It's it's going to be hard with certain religions and so on. But I just think it's a thing that people need to accept. I think there's a fallacy there when people think, oh, everything used to be great and now it isn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
This
the
is
good old days weren't usually as good for specific
right.
groups. You know, when people reminisce about the 1950s in the US, that's typically black people aren't reminiscing about the 1950s in the
No,
US, and gay people aren't
right.
reminiscing about the good old days of the mid-century. But
Yeah.
again, this illustrates that we all need to take this seriously, and we need to have almost like a software reboot of our minds to recognize the problem in real time.
Mhm.
The solution to immigration chaos and this far right, far left narrative is not no immigration or all immigration. It is controlled, reasonable immigration where the dial is again somewhere in the middle. It's not just hot or cold, it's warm.
Yeah.
And as the situation on the ground changes, we're able to adjust that dial to whether there's a security concern, we can tighten the border to be more restrictive. And as a humanitarian crisis evolves and we recognize the need to provide that support to a vulnerable population, we can turn the dial in the other direction and provide more humanitarian aid. But um, either way, this is not something that's going away, and this is not something that will resolve itself. And I think part of that grappling with this topic is this is a human problem because immigration, like you said, all it is just a movement of people from one place to another,
Right.
and that's always going to happen. So no matter how tight your borders are, I mean, there's people fleeing North Korea into South Korea. That's one of the most impregnable borders in the world, yet people are still managing to get through it.
Uh-huh.
So this concept that we're just going to stop immigration and we're going to stop people from wanting to come to a specific country, you don't want to be a fortress that way because, again, I go back to what I said. Any country that is uh, viable and any country that is worth immigrating to should accept that as a net positive for itself and its population.
Let,
So,
let me bring in our other guests. I'm Blakely. Everybody loved them the last time. It was a lot of fun. Are you cool to join this conversation, Blakely?
Yeah, I just came in about 5 minutes ago. I was listening. I was like, "Oh, okay, they're talking about immigration."
We're supposed to talk about the Irish versus the Irish Americans, but right now we're deep in this other conversation. If
It's
you
it's a
feel
good conversation. It's very relevant right now.
it is, yeah. You know, I
Blakely, it's nice to meet you, and maybe you can help me hold the ladder while O'Sheen keeps swinging at the hornet's nest.
Nice
Blakely,
to meet you too.
John Blakely.
Nice to
Um,
meet you.
you know, when I was back in Dublin doing the shoot for that video, I was meeting a lot of Ukrainians and there's a lot of Brazilians in Dublin now. They opened the doors to the Brazilians like 6 or 7 years ago.
Mm,
Just I don't know why they did it. I don't think it was maybe it was a humanitarian issue, but nothing as pressing as Palestine or Syria or anything like that.
mhm,
And you know, I met a lot of, you know, these couples. I walked up to a couple. You see them in a certain part of the video. You don't hear any audio because there's music playing. But there was somebody from Ukraine. There was somebody from Brazil. There was a couple of Irish guys. They're all having a pint together. And I said to the dude, I was like, "Where are you from?" And he goes, "Ah, Brazil." And I was like, "Oh man, I love that the Brazilians are here. There's 90,000 Brazilians here in Dublin. Maybe someday we'll get good at soccer."
ah,
It's like, come on, guys, let's all start mating so that, you know, first of all, you can give us your sallow skin so Irish people can tan on a beach instead of turning bright red,
yeah,
having a stroke. And second of all, we might get good at a kicking a ball finally. I hope there's no Irish in the chat getting insulted by this, but let's face it, the Brazilians are better at soccer than the Irish have ever been. But
uh-oh.
I see that now. They just are. It's indisputable. They won the World Cup many times. Never even got close. It's just a thing. The Irish, we love our soccer, but we've never been, you know, world leaders at that. Um, you know, I like the idea of, you know, mingling and mixing and so on. I
Yeah.
don't know why people have this knee jerk reaction against it. What do you
I
think,
mean,
Blake?
so much of it's propaganda. I agree with you. First of all, I love living in a multicultural society. That's one of the reasons why I moved to New York because I
Right.
didn't want to just eat the same food all the time. I mean, people really underestimate the importance of food, all the
Right.
different cultures that brought amazing food here. I can walk less than a mile and go to like an amazing Korean restaurant, Japanese restaurant, Polish restaurant, like Italian restaurant. I mean, that's first. But I think that so much of the immigration debate that I hate is that it's so disingenuous. I feel like a
Mhm.
lot of people fighting about immigration are not actually fighting about what they're fighting about. It's like a lot of it is based on fear mongering and lying. Like the idea that immigrants are coming in and they're taking our jobs. It's like, no, bro. First of all, the reason why nothing has been done about immigration is because corporations love to exploit migrants. That's why the people that died on that bridge collapse were immigrant workers, because
Right.
a lot of people don't want to do those jobs. Corporations don't want to pay living wages and they want to skirt labor laws. So they love bringing in undocumented immigrants.
I
And
heard that theory as well. I don't want to interrupt you, but I want to add to it. And then maybe if you want to continue on this, because I love this. I heard this theory years ago that actually illegal immigrants have the plus. There's a certain plus that's recognized by the US government. And that is, these are people who we don't have to provide for. We don't have to give them social security. We don't have to give them any sort of healthcare or anything. And they'll do all these menial jobs
Mhm.
and keep their head down, which is like getting workers for free. There's also a plus to that. And then eventually, hopefully, they seek asylum after many years. Maybe they get married to someone or they're in the
Yeah,
country long enough.
and that's what I mean when I say so much of the debate is dishonest. Because there's this like lie that like they're coming in and they're immediately getting on food stamps and they're immediately getting help and housing and all these things.
Yeah.
It's like there are some small organizations that'll help certain immigrants get work visas or help them with housing, but by and large, if anything, immigrants are a net positive to our economy. They pay taxes, they pay sales taxes, they don't get Social Security because, as you said, they're not citizens. So oftentimes they are working undocumented, so they don't have health care or anything else. And a lot of times they're working jobs like you hear what just happened in Tennessee, where a migrant, like 14-year-old, died at some poultry plant because he got hurt by one of the machines. And no one cares. The corporations certainly don't care. I
Uh-huh.
feel like, and that's not to say that there shouldn't be any laws around immigration. Like, of course, there should be reasonable laws around immigration, but so much of the fear mongering around it, in my view, is a redirection from the plutocrats and the elites to try to get struggling Americans who are really suffering in our economy that are bigger structural issues, not the whole bullshit of every 4 years, let's pretend our president's going to get us out of it. I'm talking structural economic issues that have been in place for decades. And instead of having people look up, they go look down at the immigrant and hate them and think that they're the reason for all your problems. It's such an easy scapegoat for these people.
If
And
anything, I feel like the immigrants. Sorry, if anything, I feel like they're trying to avoid getting in trouble with the law. They're
oh,
trying to
100%.
avoid getting picked up by the cops. They don't want to get drunk and hit their best friend in the bar because the guy said something insulting. Because next thing, the cops are in their door and they're going, "Where are your papers?
Yeah.
Now you're out." So they're keeping their heads low.
Yeah.
I've seen so many entitled Americans in my years. I can think of one who's the daughter of a big police detective in Long Island. And she would break lights all the time and she would do whatever the hell she wants because daddy will just get her off the hook. So she was breaking the law constantly. She actually wound up in jail for fraud in the end, for ripping people off their credit cards and stuff. It's a crazy story. But if you're an immigrant and you're thanking your lucky stars you got into this country and you can actually make a little money to send home to your family in an impoverished country, you're keeping your head low.
Yeah.
Somebody
And
tries to attack you on the street, you walk away from the fight. You're not getting into the fight because if you get into the fight, the cops are coming.
Right. And it's unfortunate that we live in like a post-truth society where like people don't care about what's true. They really don't. It's like, do I agree with what said person is saying? And if I do, then it's true. Like, but the fact is that immigrants statistically commit crimes at a much lower rate than native-born Americans because for the exact reason you just said. And as somebody who's lived in New York for a long time and is surrounded by immigrants constantly, I can't tell you how many immigrants that I've met that bust their ass, like hardest working people.
Right.
And like you said, don't want to get in trouble. I remember a story that really stuck with me because it broke my heart. My sister worked at a restaurant, and she said her boss was a psycho, and like very abusive to their cook. And the chef was in there cleaning, and just to be cruel, he turned the lights off so that the chef couldn't see. And my sister got really upset and wanted to say something. And then the cook was terrified and was like, no, 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 don't say anything. He was afraid that if she said something, it might get him in trouble and then he might get kicked out. But he didn't even
It's
have
like
done anything wrong.
it's like Better Call Saul when he winds up when he's throwing the trash out. I don't know if you saw that episode. He's throwing the trash out and he gets locked in the room and he doesn't want to go through the security entrance because that will trigger an alarm. And he winds up there for 3 hours waiting for somebody else to throw their trash out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thoughts on this, John?
Yeah, so there's definitely exploitation on both sides. It is a lot of what Blakely is saying with the migrant labor. They know they're here illegally. They understand that, and that is actually weaponized against them. And when I worked up north in Vermont, of all places, picturesque liberal Vermont.
Mm-hmm.
We responded to a call on a farm, and a person that was working on that farm got caught up in the machinery and was killed.
Oh.
And when we got there, the farm owner denied knowing the guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to pull him off to the side. And I said, listen, there's one of two ways this goes. Are you telling me this person broke into your dairy farm and started milking your cows at 4 a.m.? Because if that's the story you're going with, this is going to get much more complicated for you. If you tell me that this person's here undocumented, that's fine. But we need to get his name. We need to get his identification, whatever you have, because we have to notify the family that he's deceased. And he kind of looked at me like, all right, and then he gave me the guy's information. But the interesting side of that situation is all the other people that were working there were very scared to talk to us because, again, I'm a border patrol agent. I'm an immigration official. And we weren't even there for that. We were just the responding units in the area. But that being said, it is absolutely exploitative from the business side perspective. And there is a level of illegal immigration that the United States government is comfortable with, which sounds very strange. But that being said, the other problem on the other side of that is a lot of the immigrants are now taking advantage of that. And they're essentially saying, well, if you're going to exploit me, I'm going to exploit the system that you're putting me in. So the difference between legal immigration and illegal immigration is a lot of the illegal immigrants are coming here with the explicit purpose of earning as much money as possible in those menial jobs that most Americans don't want to do, send that money home, live together in communal apartments, trailers, wherever they can find. And after 5 or 10 years, they leave. So we keep losing and recirculating that labor force. Whereas if we had a structure where we used to have this, there's something called H2 visas, which is basically agricultural worker visas. So one of the arguments that we've made in the past is to expand that program to include protection for those people that they come here, they have legal status, and very few farmers and agricultural industrial places are willing to do that, because what that does is it now provides legal mechanisms for recourse if that worker is abused, if that worker is assaulted or harassed by the employer. And they don't want to do that. The other thing it establishes is a livable wage, which again, if they can pay an immigrant $2 an hour, they don't want to pay an American $12 an hour, but even an H2 visa recipient would have to earn at least something close to that 12 or 15 or $20 an hour.
Right.
That is a cost-saving measure for them. So their solution is, well, this is just cheaper. And so as a society, we don't see this happening unless you're in those communities. So it's exploitative from all sides. And it does affect the American population, especially in the lower socioeconomic demographics, because some of those jobs could be high-paying jobs if they were afforded to American citizens. But because they're filled by illegal labor, they're low-paying jobs. They're not jobs that people want. and they're producing cheap products and lining the pockets of the corporations that are running those businesses. So it's just an exploitation of the entire system, as well as the individuals involved in it. And
One
it is very challenging to deal with because it pretty much has to undo a lot of our economics.
one of the classic talking points I hear all the time, and even Dave Moore brought it up in my Ireland video last week, is they're sending only their men. Where are the women and children? These are young men of fighting age.
That is
Where are the
hilarious.
women and children? Which I just
I
find so funny because, of course, I was in New York, as you both know, for 20 years. And the men were living 14 for a room and working 20-hour days in the back of a deli, frying eggs or whatever they were doing, cleaning up people's vomit outside on the street in Second Avenue and sending the money home. They can't afford to bring their entire family. They're entering a strange country. A lot of them did not know the language. It behooves anyone who lives in New York to learn how to speak some Spanish. Definitely. It's a Duolingo city, I would think of it as that. And they send the money home. And hopefully, eventually, after 10 years, then go home, return home themselves. They don't want to sit in the back of a deli for fucking the rest of their lives. But you hear this talking point a lot. Where are the women and children? Blakely?
Yeah, I mean, as I was saying, a lot of this is just so much of it, which again is maddening, is just messaging to scare people like, oh no, scary men, they're going to come rape me. Like,
Right.
a lot of it's that. A lot of it's that. Because as you just said, a lot of them are just working and they can't bring their whole family here. But the whole debate is just so exhausting because, like I said, it's not a serious debate. No one has an interest in actually doing anything about immigration. The reason I believe, and this is speculation on my part, but I believe it nonetheless, that we don't have an immigration reform bill is because neither party actually wants to change it. They like
Mhm.
it as a campaign issue. They like it to fearmonger. They like it to get their bases riled up. And so to actually do something about it would kind of take that issue off the table for them.
Yeah.
So they're not incentivized to
Yeah.
really do anything about it, which is why every election cycle, the caravans are back and the migrants are back and the storming is back. But
It's
then
a
after
great
the election, it like kind of goes away.
Yeah, they stick it in their back pocket whenever they need to pull it out, right?
Yeah. And that
no,
doesn't mean that there aren't obviously migrants coming in. But again, a lot of these are also structural issues they don't want to do anything about. Like, you want to go in and you want to wreck Latin America and you want to do coups and overthrow governments and cause all this mayhem. And then you act shocked and chagrined when people are fleeing to come to our southern border.
It's so funny right now. There's like mega hard right wing neo fascist guys in England who are staunchly anti Islam and anti immigrant for the most part, let's face it, going over to Ireland now and stoking the flames with the Irish. The Brits are going over to the Irish to say, stand your ground and keep your country pure. You're the fucking reason we all left the country in the first place. The hypocrisy is astonishing.
Right, and a lot like another thing is too is that like a lot of this is, or I shouldn't say a lot of this, but there's a strain of this that is just right-wing fascism
Mm-hmm.
where there are people that will just come out and say the quiet part out loud. They want this to be a white country. They don't
Yes.
like that the country is demographically changing,
Yeah.
which I just don't even understand because first of all, I don't give a shit if there are more Latinos in this country than there are white people. What do I give a fuck? Like it and but they're so terrified of it.
the
So
food might be better.
The
what?
food will be better.
Well, the one thing, the food might be a little better.
Yeah, and like, but it's these Nazi talking points of like, oh, they're coming in to run over the whole country and remember the good old days when the country wasn't brown. And some people will just come out and say, and I've heard it multiple times, multiculturalism is a failure. What? Like, that's just coming out and saying you don't want different cultures here.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not disagreeing that we don't have issues with our southern border or immigration. We do. But the people that are bitching about it the most are the ones who have no serious critique and who have no interest in addressing it, like for real. Like it's either Nazis or it's oftentimes people who I think are not as into politics. They don't pay attention as much and they just hear it constantly from people. And so it starts to scare them. Like I've literally had people say to me, like, aren't you scared to live in New York because of all the migrants that are like taking it over? I'm like, Susan, you live in Ohio. So I know that you don't know what it's like to live in New York, but like I live here. That's not what's happening.
Fucking Susan. Well, there was that, I remember there was that trope that went around. I don't know if you guys saw this on social media. It was circulating on Facebook for a while. And I had to inoculate a couple of friends of mine that were reposting this. And it was this video of a woman sitting in a car. And, it was this face video of, hey, y'all, hey, ladies, just be careful. I was at Target and these guys were following me around and y'all might get trafficked. And I kept seeing this regurgitated over and over. And I actually posted something. I said, listen, this is how trafficking works. One of the elements of being trafficked is someone will not miss you or come looking for you. If you are a wealthy upper middle class suburban white woman, people will look for you. So you are not a target for sex trafficking. Point number one. Point number two, you are not easily exploited. You are not easily controlled. You are not looking for drugs, money, and you have recourse. So you are not a very juicy target for sex trafficking. So and then the whole thing ended up being debunked because the woman posted where she was at a Target. They went back and reviewed the video in the Target because the law enforcement actually got involved because they thought that this was a serious threat. And it turned out nobody was following her in the Target. There was no van in the parking lot. So the whole thing was made up. And again, it's that what I illustrated earlier with that illusory truth effect, where people heard that story and they said, well, why would she lie? Obviously, this is something that happened to her. Look how upset she is. And that got perpetuated. Now, again, the other problem that this does is it takes away from actual victims of actual sex trafficking, which is a obvious real thing. And this is where that conversation shifts to those extremes. This is where we lose the plot because as you're saying, there is absolutely a problem with unchecked immigration. There are residual effects that not only impact the immigrant community and the immigrant population because they're forced to live in the shadows and operate in this weird legally gray area, but it also is damaging to the infrastructure of the country because rather than absorbing and welcoming these people and assimilating them through a robust mechanism that can actually sustain itself, they're being thrust into the community. And now the community is naturally recoiling from this because, again, you're seeing this on the streets of New York. And I'm sure you can speak to this, where people are being sheltered in temporary housing. And there's really no way to do this in a controlled way where they're saying, we're going to give you 30 days and then figure it out. Right. And that's not a solution either. So the problem is both sides, like you're saying. I don't know how motivated they are to solve this problem because then it is off the table. It does go away. It's that perpetual war on drugs, war on terror. Yeah. As long as we keep that going, we can fund it and we can keep working against it, even though that there's no clear end in sight. And so immigration, unfortunately, to my eye, is starting to shift in that realm of war on drugs, war on terror, this perpetual thing that will never be really solved. But I think even that orientation is wrong. You're not going to solve immigration. What you need to do is it's mitigation versus elimination. That's the approach. You have to mitigate it, keep it controlled, and have a sane immigration policy that allows for humanitarian aid and for people to come into this country through as many legal mechanisms as possible so they don't have to resort to sneaking across the river in Texas at night. They have avenues to do this. But at the same time, have a sane policy where we're not just saying come one, come all, and we're not going to check anybody and everybody just come and go as they please, because that also obviously produces some national security concerns. And the orientation here of the irrational pseudo experts on both sides of the argument is where people are just having to pick a side because the middle is so limited in their voice because all you're hearing is this craziness amplified from both sides of the aisle.
One thing that annoys me as well is this feeling that whenever I hear one of these people speak about this, so neo-fascists talking about this kind of thing, it's as if these people come over there for fun. You know, they're coming to our land to have some of the, like, they're not running from desperation. They're not arriving in out of desperation. Like in most cases, if they're coming to Ireland, I can tell you, they're not coming to better weather. You know,
Yeah.
these are people who are used to higher temperatures and a lot more sunshine. Next thing, they're standing in drizzly old Dublin, looking at buses and trains past them, and people, white people, looking out, giving them the evil eye. Like, it's not exactly fun for these people either. If they arrive on your border, for the most part, they've arrived out of a terrible, terrible desperation issue. And, you know, this
And
is
we
why
should
it's
have a
called
system
asylum.
set up for that.
Yeah.
But it's like we don't. It's just this mess. And we don't have enough immigration judges. And it's like, again, our country just sits all outdated. Like, we don't want to update shit. Like, we don't want to update bridges, and we don't want to make sure that, you know, planes are built properly. And
They
we
were
don't
trying
want
they were trying to update the
immigration
bridge. They were
system.
trying to fix the bridge, but then
Yeah,
Yes.
they updated the bridge with a ferry.
Yeah. But I mean, the thing is too about but then this also goes into the fact that we, instead of actually addressing immigration in any type of sane way, you've got motherfuckers out here just talking about the great replacement theory. Like, they're just busing all these immigrants here so that they can replace whites. And that's another insane thing that gets spread constantly because they go, oh, they're going to make them come in so they can vote Democrat, which is also a really, really stupid conspiracy theory when you think about it, because first of all, they can't vote. But even if you want to go with the right wing conspiracy that somehow they're magically voting, what makes you think that a lot of these people are liberals? A lot of these people are deeply conservative and religious. Like,
yes,
have you
yes.
ever met someone from Venezuela? Like, I've met people from Venezuela. A lot of them are Church of Latter-day Saints.
Have you ever met a Cuban from Miami?
Yeah. Well, no, they don't
No,
mind
hardly.
They're
immigration.
not exactly communist friendly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
But
That's
the
why
other
it
side of
makes
that
no
point
sense.
too, I'm sorry, Oshin, just the other side of that point too, what you're saying about people in their most desperate hour, the other flip side of that coin is that the people that are coming here legally are actually the elites of their societies.
Right.
So we're getting the Indian engineers who are coming to the United States to earn a higher salary, but in India, they are the cream of the crop.
Yes.
In China, those people are the elites. So we're not getting,
Dude, when I was in the States, I mean, for the first few years, I was on a P1, a performance visa, but I eventually got the O1. I came in, they grant you the O1. That's extraordinary ability. They recognize your ability and they want you in the country. I'm one of those people. I'm not a fucking Indian engineer or anything close to it.
Well,
But
the only
again,
other old ones I
case in
met
point.
were hockey players. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
they
pretty
give it to a
impressive.
lot of sports guys as well. They're like, we want him on our fucking team, just let him into the country. Same kind of thing. They're bringing in the talent. Also, you need about $5,000 to $6,000 to put in your first entry, your paperwork. You need to hire a lawyer. You need to have the money, the gravitas, to put in all of that work, all that paperwork, and then sit around and wait for your approval. So it's just not an option for a lot of people.
Yeah, it is a very convoluted process because you do have to hire an immigration attorney if you want to do this. I actually have a pretty close friend of mine who was on an O1 visa and she married an American citizen. And even her process of naturalizing is very complicated, very convoluted. The system is not designed to be streamlined and simple. So that's part of the reason. And to what Blakely said earlier, there are mechanisms in place for things like asylum, but they are incredibly restrictive in the criteria that they honor. So one of the things that, again, is happening right now, the underlying reasons to seek asylum or refugee status, and even those are different classifications legally, because a refugee arrives, there's a formal process, whereas an asylum is at the actual border when you just show up and say, if you send me back, I will be killed. Those categories were specifically designed for religious persecution, for political persecution, things that were very rigidly defined and categorized. And you had to make that claim, and you had to substantiate that claim through evidence. Right now, what's happening is people that are fleeing gang violence, poverty, war, they're applying for those benefits, even though by the letter of the law, they're not entitled to them, because we don't consider economic migrants and people fleeing gang violence as asylum seekers. And we're trying to update those rules, because part of that problem is that, again, exploitation of a imperfect system works both ways. People figure out, if I show up at the border and say that MS-13 is going to kill me if I don't end up in the US, and that gets spread as, hey, this is the ticket into America. Just say this magic line and you're in.
Right.
And in 7 years, you will have your asylum case. That's part of that broken system. I mean, the last statistic I heard, that out of all the people that had a hearing with an immigration judge, 14% show up, and it's been as low as 4.
Wow.
Because you're getting a date that says you arrive in 2008 and your court date is 2016. Are you really going to see that person in 2016 show up to court if they can disappear into the system, and they only planned on being here for 5 years anyway to work and send that money back? So again, we've created this incredibly weird paradoxical situation where we could be benefiting as a country from the immigrant labor if we created a legal mechanism for people to, come in, work for a couple years. If that's what they want to do, they pay a certain portion of their salary into some sort of fund. They pay taxes, they pay income tax, they maybe even pay into Social Security. That's one of the things that they can do. And then when they leave, they have an avenue of, hey, you can stay for another 5 years and bring your family members. You can adjust to a green card holder if you want to stay here. If you choose to go back, that's okay too. But that formalizes that process. And that's what drives people into the shadows, is because they see the legal avenue as being too costly, too cumbersome, too imposing, too overwhelming. And the illegal side is so viable and simple. And there's just a minor risk of, well, if I get arrested at the border, I got to go back. Or if I get to New York, or a quote unquote sanctuary city, I'm really not going to be hassled. So I can just work and then leave. It really forces the hand of that person, because they're making the obvious choice. And I mean, I can put myself in that position. If that was my situation, what would I do? I
You
would
do
do the same
anything, you
thing.
have to.
I would do the same thing. I would leave
Yeah.
my wife in my home country. I would go work my ass off for 10 years and share an apartment with 10 other guys, and then make as much money as I can, live on as little as possible, and just go back. And
It's
then my
like,
son would do the same thing, and we would just keep
getting
that
back to
going.
this thing. Yeah, where are the women and children? This guy is like, he's got his wife and his 2 kids. He's going to a foreign country. He doesn't know if he has to sleep on the streets. He's not going to bring his wife and child to that. He has to make that horrible decision. Listen, I'll go. I have no idea. I can't speak their language. I don't know where the hell I'm going. Apparently it's freezing cold over there, but I'll go do it. And then you wind up with like 30 guys standing on the street, smoking cigarettes with nothing to do. They can't get work and so on. Then the asshole goes by in his fucking BMW, and he's like, oh, it's just a bunch of men of fighting age. And where are the women and children? It's the most ignorant thing anyone can say. It's extra bad as well with Ireland. And I mean, I get really riled up with Ireland because it's my home country. But Ireland and England, I mean, for one, England pillaged the entire planet. There's a reason why the Indians drink a lot of tea to this day. They went around the entire world and infiltrated, by force in many cases, annexing land around the world. So they're the last people who should be complaining about people coming into their country. And for a long time, they didn't complain. The other thing is the Irish. I mean, the Irish wouldn't exist if there wasn't asylum, even for illegals. A lot of Irish arrived on the shores of New York. They faced Bill the Butcher characters going, you fucking dirty Irish mutt, get out of here, and many other countries around the world. We had to disappear, and thank God for asylum, and thank God for illegal immigration, because they figure it out. They go over, they work for a while, then they meet maybe an American, get married, make a family, and then they get naturalization. But like, the Irish are the last fucking people to be complaining about people coming into our country. there's like 35 million Irish around the world. There's only 5 or 6 in Ireland itself. It is the very definition of a diaspora around the world.
Yeah, I think I looked it up recently and it was like, I think America alone, like the US has like 40 or even more than that million Americans who are of Irish descent.
Right. Yeah, the
And
figure's much higher than I'm saying. Yeah.
yeah, I think it's probably even more than that. I
Mhm.
already forgot, but I am pro immigration generally, even outside of this stupid and raging debate that we have going on in the US right now. I'm pro immigration generally. I think multiculturalism is a good thing. I think that America being a home for immigrants and people to come regardless of what they do. I don't think it should just be for rich people who are engineers. Like regardless of what they want to do. I think it's a good thing. That's one of the things that I like about it here. I like that you can choose to be here. You can choose to want to come here. And I think that, again, like, of course, you have to have rules around immigration just so that it's not insane and just so that we don't have no organization.
Well, I would say a lot of people on the right, on the neo-Nazi side of things, complaining and marching on the streets would grab you right there on your point. Don't let any all and sundry in. Please control it. That would be their main complaint.
Right, but
And their talking
first of all,
points
I
are
don't
kind of-
believe them. I think a lot of them are just racist. Like they
Yes.
just don't want
Right.
multiculturalism. They don't want people that aren't white coming in.
Right.
I mean,
Well, and this is what I said earlier. I think people can be right for the wrong reasons. I think there is an
Yeah.
argument to be made about sane formal immigration processes, but those reasons can be guided by some very nefarious undertones, which
Yeah.
people will either explicitly say out loud or will dog whistle in comments like, we have to protect our country. And my question always is, protect our country from who?
right, like no one's
Who
saying
are
to
you?
me, like when I get attacked by like neo-Nazis and stuff, and I do, one thing that they don't say to me is go back to your country, go back to where you came from.
Because you're
Because
white.
because they don't see me that way.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that I might be less of a whatever second, third generation. Like there might be somebody Latino here whose family's been here longer than mine has.
Yeah.
But then they'll say to them, go back to your country, but not to me. And it's like, that's why, like I said, to me, the debate is just so unserious and so bad faith from so many people. Because also, if we really wanted to do something about it in this country, immigration, and not just sit around and use it as a political football, then why haven't we? When those motherfuckers in Congress actually want to get something done, like ban TikTok, they were out right there next day
Yeah.
on the floor, voting,
Yeah,
getting it
take
through
them
committee like
anytime.
it ain't no
Yeah.
thing. Like it was
Yeah.
there. When those bitches want to raise the debt ceiling because they want to make sure that the stock market isn't affected, right there, filibuster doesn't matter. Everybody's in line. But then when
Sure.
it comes to anything that either benefits the American people or something like immigration that these ghouls and goblins like to campaign on, all of a sudden we just can't find it. Can't find it. Can't find the bipartisanship. Can't find the bills. Can't find the lobbyists.
Yeah. The complications set in.
Yeah, everything,
Well,
and then everything is really complicated. But
I'm gonna
when it comes to something that they actually want to do, it's
Well,
done.
since Blakely has now taken over and climbed up on the ladder with O'Sheen, I'm gonna take this opportunity to top off my wine and use the bathroom. So I'll be right back.
Yeah, no problem, man. Take your time. Yeah, sorry, we were supposed to have a fun conversation about Irish versus Irish Americans, but it got a little heavy. If you want, we can talk about that.
No,
You've
I
never
mean,
been-
I don't mind because I didn't realize that. Like, first of all, I don't mind talking about anything. You're fun to talk to generally.
Sure.
So we could talk about anything. I was gonna ask you, how do you say your name? When I looked at your name, how it's spelled, I'm like, how the fuck do you say that?
It doesn't help. Some people go, "Can you write that down for me?" I'm like, "It's gonna make it worse. It's gonna make it worse." So it's O'Sheen.
O'Sheen?
O'Sheen. I know people say O'Sheen. It's okay. I'm so
Wait, is it
used to it.
O'Sheen or Usheen?
O'Sheen. That's good.
Usheen.
O'Sheen. Yeah. O'Sheen. Yeah. It's an old Irish name. It means young deer.
Okay. Yeah,
O'Shean.
okay. So my sister named her daughter Saoirse.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah.
And because she's obsessed with Ireland and Irish culture, and she used to like even though, like, as I've said before, we have no connection to it, but she really loves it. And so she named her daughter, one of her daughters, Maeve, the other one, Saoirse. And
Oh my
people
gosh, she
always
went right in.
mispronounce it.
Yeah. I have a clip here. It's pretty famous. It's going around the internet for ages now, since Saoirse Ronan, our famous Irish actress, was on Stephen Colbert. Let me pull it up, and she's pronouncing Irish names. I think our mutual friend Matt Leib could have used this for Tig there several weeks ago.
Love Irish people. Give me what's a word I could say.
Let me get straight to the names.
Absolutely.
Telescope up there.
Yeah, he's got the names here.
How's it going? I'm Stephen.
Saoirse.
Yeah, Saoirse like a nurse. That's
Yeah.
nice. How can I, who aren't from Ireland, to pronounce? Help me out. These are real Irish names.
You can hear
Tell
that,
me how
yeah?
I'm supposed to say
Yeah.
it. That's Saoirse.
Does anyone know how to pronounce that in the audience?
How?
Tig.
Tig?
Yeah. Neve.
What?
Neve.
Nave?
Yeah. But it's Neve.
That's
Neve?
you.
Best way to get your accent
Neve?
kind of up and running.
How about this one?
Oshin.
Ocean.
Oshin.
Osheen.
Osh-in.
Osheen.
Yeah. How do you think that's pronounced?
Siobhan.
Oh, Siobhan.
Yeah, Siobhan.
Siobhan.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
A lot
by
of
the
people
way.
say
Siobhan.
Sayopan.
Ridiculous. Now, this is the
Ridiculous.
one that
They're all
absolutely breaks
ridiculous.
my brain.
There's a lot of vowels in that name. Quiva.
One more time.
Quiva.
You go to hell.
Yeah, we have some funny names. Yeah, Oisin, it's a real old. Being named Oisin in Ireland is like being named Romulus and Remus or something in Italy, or Abraham Lincoln or something in the States. It's an old, you learn about, whoops, video kept playing. Yeah, it's an old mythological character that every kid in Ireland learns about. There's an old story of Oisin and Niamh in the land of youth. And when you're a little kid, you get read this story. So to be named Oisin it's a difficult name even in Ireland to carry. A little less now, but when I was a kid, there was like one other Oisin. And I believe there's only one other Oisin O'Malley in the entire world. And he's an artist who lives in London.
Yeah, I was like, they're very overwhelming because I'm like, wait, how do you?
Well, we have our own, we have Irish language, right?
Right.
Are you
Okay.
aware of that?
I am. Okay, it's Gaelic, right?
It's Gaelic. Os
Okay.
Gaeilge, yes.
So I only know that just because I was looking up Irish names a while back and they kept saying Gaelic. And I was like, wait a second, what's Gaelic?
Yeah.
Because do people speak Gaelic in Ireland, or is it something that was like taken away?
It was taken away by guess who? I'll give you 3 guesses and the first 2 don't count. By
England?
the Brits. It was illegal to speak Irish or to practice Catholicism for ages
Okay.
in Ireland. English was beaten into us. Personally, I'm happy because I love the English language, but I'm not happy because it took away a lot of our cultural identity. When you grow up in Ireland, one of the subjects you have in school, since you're a little kid, all the way to when you leave school and go to college, you have to have Irish. In fact, if you don't take the Irish exam in your finals before you go to college, in second degree education, all your other results are null and void. They had to make it that way to kind of hang on to our original culture, because a lot of people, of course, were losing the language. Like the language was drifting. It's an anachronism at this point, but there are a lot of people who speak it, especially in the west of Ireland, that was less influenced by the British, by the vicinity to Britain.
Mhm.
So you're growing up in Dublin, it's less likely that you have Irish, but I have memories when I was a kid. My mother would still have both happening. So she would, we'd know she was dead serious about stuff when she spoke Irish. She'd be like, kids, come on, it's time for bed. Oh, Mom, we don't want to go to bed. Come on, kids, it's after 8. Come on, you've got to go to bed. Oh, we don't want to. Susan Styra Nish. And we'd be like, oh, fuck, we better go. When she goes into Irish, it's like, shit, we're going to get a whack next. That's next in line. But Irish is a beautiful language, and it's very, very different to English. Some people think it sounds a bit like Russian or something. So I'll count to 10 in Irish. A hain, a do, a tri, a cahar, a cuig, a she, a shacht, a nacht, a ni, a dieg.
Oh, that's cool.
That sounds absolutely nothing like Russian.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like
John
Russian.
speaks Russian.
It doesn't sound like Russian. It does sound
Okay.
really cool, though. I think it's good that they teach that because I think it's important to hold on to your culture.
Yeah.
I think that it would be cool if more people could even speak it. I only knew like a couple, like maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago when I looked
Mhm.
up those names that Ireland had their own language. But at the time I didn't know why it was gone. Like I didn't know anything about the colonization of Ireland or
Right.
anything like that. So I was like, why'd they get rid of their language?
Yeah, one day we're like, this isn't cool
Yeah.
anymore. Let's just take their language from across the
Yeah.
water.
It
No,
sounds very ancient. That's what it is. They had to modernize because it sounds ancient.
you know what it is? I mean, clearly it was the Brits that just literally beat it out of us. I mean, there's no way to sugarcoat it. It was beaten out of us. We were colonized and we were converted, and it's funny now though because a lot of modern words were never invented. So modern words when you speak Irish, and I know a lot of people who speak absolutely fluent Irish. My uncle teaches Irish to Irish actors, or he used to years ago, in the Peacock Theatre there in Dublin, which is all Irish plays, all Irish language plays, and he would teach, refine the Irish for the actors so they pronounce things properly, depending on the dialect, depending on when the play was written, which region, etc., etc. I know a lot of fluent Irish speakers, and it gets really, really funny because it's very descriptive. It's a really descriptive language. It describes what you're looking at, and it has a lot of onomatopoeia in there. And I think that may be the reason why we have a lot of poets, a lot of great songwriters that come out of Ireland, because of this descriptive way that we have. I'm trying to think of examples now, like confusion. When there's confusion in a room, you say "ri ra" agus rula bula. "Ri ra," like here, there, agus rula, and rula, and all around. That's their way of
That's cool.
describing confusion in a room. It was here, it was there, and it was all around. You see, so it's kind of a funny dancing sound.
Okay,
Like,
so I have a question then, because I really want to keep learning about this. Okay, I'm going to get connected to my Irish roots. I will. Also,
well, you have to annex a home. Do you remember that was your deal?
I know I'm going to. I'm still planning on that. In fact, maybe I'll learn how to say it in Irish. Okay, so here's my question: why do they call it Gaelic and not Irish?
We call it Irish. Gaelic comes from Gaelga. Gaelga is a language that kind of covers Scotland, Wales, and Ireland. Although their Gaelga is a little different to ours. They're kind of different dialects. But if you grow up in Ireland, or if you just go to Ireland right now and you say, "Can you say that in Irish?" They'll say whatever. If they know how to speak Irish, they'll say it in Irish. We
So
just
if I
call it
said, "Can you
Irish.
say this in Gaelic?" They'll know I'm an out of towner.
Yeah. That's a good question. I'm glad you brought that up. Because if you say, "Can you say that in Gaelic?" you sound like a foreigner who doesn't quite understand. Just say, "Can you say it in Irish?" Like you would say to a French person, "Can you say it in French?" Ireland,
Yeah.
Irish. That the Irish people, the Irish language, Irish.
Okay,
That's it.
so the follow-up question to that is, why do they call Irish music Celtic and not just Irish music?
We call it Irish traditional music. It's out-of-towners who call it Celtic music. I've never heard
really?
anyone say Celtic music.
People say
I mean, I
here.
probably heard them say it, but I go, "Oh, yeah, you're American or whatever." We call
Right.
it Irish trad, traditional trad.
I got corrected by someone one time, okay? Because I don't know if maybe this is because in my spirit, I actually am Irish. I love Irish music and I've loved it for a very long time. And one time I was talking to someone, they're like, "Oh, what kind of music do you love?" I said, "I love Irish music." And they were like, "Sweetie, it's called Celtic music."
No, they were totally wrong. But mind you, you said Irish music. Now, Irish music could be anyone from Ireland, so that could be you too.
No, not
Right?
the no.
You mean
I don't like that
Irish traditional music?
Yes, I'm talking about the
Okay, you want
stomping on the
it.
floor and the
Okay, you
fucking
want it from
accordion.
Oisin O'Malley, the most Irish name and probably the most Irish person you've ever met in your life. I would bet money because I'm directly related to Granuaile, to Grace O'Malley, and so on. She was the Queen of Ireland, right? You want to hear it from me? You just say, "I like trad, Irish trad,
Okay.
traditional music. I like trad," and that's
Okay,
the
so
guy in the corner with the you know, the whatever, you know, they got the
The
fiddle
accordion.
and the accordion and yeah, and the tin
And the
whistle.
fiddle.
You have to notice as well when you eventually go to Ireland, the trad players, they're not playing for you. You go into a pub and they're at one of the seats, just like around one of the tables. They're having pints and they're all grouped around. They're playing by themselves. They're not facing you, right? It's a weird thing. They just happen to be playing and there are onlookers. That's how it works. And the funniest thing for me is I always say the Irish trad players look like they've been damned to play the music for eternity. They're not having fun. So you'll see a tin whistle player like, and it looks like they're paying penance. They're not like performing or doing any of this. There's no movement. They look sad when they play. It's weird. We're weird people.
That's really funny. That's
John,
awesome.
did you ever get over to Ireland?
No, I haven't. As much as I've traveled, that's one of the places I've never been. But after watching your Ireland video, it's made me it's made me fall in love with a place I've never been. So well done. And I advise anyone who hasn't seen it, if for whatever reason, to go watch it and rewatch it. So excellent work. And it's now on my list. It's not a very long list of places that I do want to go, but Ireland is definitely on the list. I have to convince my wife that we can go there in the summer when the weather is probably at its peak. I don't know.
Yeah.
How is the weather year round? Is it worth traveling there any other time than
Jesus.
summertime?
Well, I got lucky because, you know, the 6 weeks I was there filming, it was amazing. Like, I'm super sunburned to most of that video. I've been pulling reds out of the color spectrum of the video for the past 8 weeks because I'm like, oh my God, you look like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Yeah, I saw you walking around in shorts. I'm thinking, is that?
Oh yeah,
Ireland?
we got a lot of sun. It can happen, but it's not famous for its weather. When the sun shines on Ireland, it's the most beautiful place in the world. But unfortunately, the rest of the time, it's irrigating the crops. You know,
Yeah.
it's preparing the. That's why it's so fucking green, because there's so much irrigation on the land all year round. They say if you can see the clouds, it's going to rain. If you can't see the clouds, it's already raining. You know, it's one of those things. So I would say September, man. September is the best month. So I'm born on the 3rd of September. And all the way back since I was a kid, it's never been bad weather. Because I remember the weather on my birthday. So it's like notable weather. And it's always been a beautiful day on the 3rd of September. And in fact, when I went back on the 3rd to celebrate my birthday. And it was stunning weather for like over a month, like beyond stunning. It was better than here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, you don't get the ridiculous heat, like all of that crazy heat. There's always a little wind and stuff.
Which is
But you do
nice.
get
That's
that,
funny.
yeah.
You have the same birthday as my husband.
Blakely,
Really?
I don't want to alarm you, but someone's entering your apartment.
Oh yeah,
think
that's
that was-
my husband.
There you go.
That's my husband who
Yeah,
has the same birthday as Oisin.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
There you go. Virgos, man, all the way.
Yeah.
We're the best.
I was making sure that was someone you knew because I was worried that it was an
Illegal.
actually an illegal immigrant breaking into your home
Breaking
and
in.
stealing your dog.
The differences between Irish Americans and the Irish are pretty. There are, for me, Irish Americans are Americans. They're
Yeah.
Americans.
Oh, I got very much reminded of that by all the people who were infuriated by my video that I made about Joe Biden, where I made a joke about Irish people being alcoholics, and people were mad. They were very mad, and reminding me that I am not Irish. I am an American.
For years, there was no such thing as alcoholism in Ireland. It just didn't exist. It was just like, oh, Paddy, I know he likes a few drinks and all, but I wouldn't call him an alcoholic. That's like there's chronic alcoholism in Ireland, but we just didn't recognize it because it's a difference of culture. But an Irish person who gets offended by being called an alcoholic or a heavy drinker that's a strange thing. I never get offended. The audience watching right now, many of them call me a miserable drunk constantly. I'm like, no, scruffy miserable drunk. Come on, get it right, guys. Come on, let's go.
Well, and I was saying it like just, lightheartedly, jokingly, because I know I'm not Irish. I'm an Irish American. However, I do have Irish heritage, and I come from a very long line of alcoholism. Like my dad, my grandfather, my like great grandfather, and I myself am an alcoholic in recovery. So
Wow.
I was like I've never met anybody that can drink like Irish people drink. So it was normal for me. I don't know if it's genetic or not, but it was normal for me to throw back 10 beers easily and a couple shots in a night.
I
And
think the Russians will give you a run for your money.
Yeah,
maybe
they
you're
will.
right. Maybe the Russians. Okay. But besides them, but it's also very cold in Russia. So I totally understand. Like it's very dark there. But I don't know if a part of it's genetic, but my point was like just saying it like lightheartedly, and it wasn't so many people, but it was a decent amount of people that got really mad about it. And I was like, and then they started thinking that I was insulting Irish people overall, even though the video was in defense of Irish Americans. It was about Irish Americans. And they were like, you're insulting Irish people because I didn't know how to say Taoiseach, or how do you say it?
Taoiseach. Taoiseach.
Taoiseach. Yes, thank
Taoiseach.
you. I didn't know how to say that. So
Sure.
I didn't want to say it because I didn't want to be insulting. Like I didn't want to mispronounce it. So I was
Right.
like, oh, I'm just not going to say it. And someone was like, you're making fun of our language. I was like, no, I'm not.
Oh, for God's
I
sake.
just don't want to be. I don't want
You're
to.
not meeting very fun Irish people over there. What's going on? They're supposed. Irish people don't take themselves very seriously at all, and they take everything on the chin. You can say whatever you want about Ireland. It's one of the
That's
few
like-
countries in the world where you can say Ireland is shite, and we won't get offended. We'll be like, yeah, it kind of is, isn't it? We should all just
Yeah.
move to Spain. You know, most other countries. I'm here in Italy. You say Italy is shite, they get offended. You know, they get it. It reaches them somehow. The Irish are like, eh.
I
You
think
know?
that's the reason why the blowback that I got surprised me, was because I have met people from Ireland here in New York. I've met a lot of Irish people, and they always have like base senses of humor, like great senses of humor. And so I was like kind of surprised.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't tell a joke in Ireland, it's a sad thing. If you're an Irish person, you can't tell a joke or a story. You're a very strange Irish person. I think it comes as well from sitting around the pubs. Like, what are we going to do all day? Someone tell us a story. Someone tell us a joke, and make sure to stretch the joke out really, really long. Just because I've got 16 pints to drink and I'm bored, and there's, Paddy in the
John,
corner.
are you Irish?
No, so I'm man, I don't know what I am at this point. This whole conversation is confusing my ethnicity. I'm multi-ethnic, I guess. So nationalistically, I guess I do identify as an American. I was born in the former Soviet Union. I lived there till I was about 8 or 9 years old. I moved to Israel as a kid. Lived there in the
Dun,
90s.
dun, dun.
That was your
Dun,
best
Yeah, I'm
friend.
kidding.
Plot twist. I did not serve in the IDF, but after Israel, in the mid 90s, my family immigrated to the US, and we lived here since. I've been here since then. So, as Oshid mentioned, I do speak Russian. Don't speak Hebrew anymore, but yeah, I guess it's a convoluted thing. But like you said earlier, I always said that you always feel at home when you meet somebody and they don't ask you where you're from.
Mhm.
Yeah.
They just assume you're from the same place that you're occupying in that time. So I finally have that where I live now. I'm not going to dox myself by telling everybody where I live, but in my current state, in one of the 50 states where I currently live, I feel that. I didn't feel that in Texas because, again, it's a very small community, and everybody kind of assumed that if you were a white guy, you were either there as part of the military or part of the law enforcement apparatus. So it's been, I'm finally feeling at home where I'm at now. So, but I've assimilated fairly well. But yeah, so long story short, I'm an American. And if I get to know you better and we start having that conversation and I have a couple drinks, then I will stretch out a 30-minute story into 6 hours and give you my whole lineage.
Okay, but you're ethnically Russian.
So ethnically, I consider myself Jewish because,
okay.
again, that ethnicity versus I'm not religious, but
Mhm.
ethnically, my family origin's actually from Spain. I was talking to Oshin earlier. We traced my farthest ancestor back to a Spanish mercenary. That's as far back as we got in the 1400s. But so yeah, I'm assuming based through historical events, the Jews that fled Spain during the Inquisition ended up in Europe, Eastern Europe, Ukraine, Russia, and then eventually where I came from. So I've never considered myself a Russian just because when we left Russia, there was a lot of anti-Semitism, and Russians were Russians, and the others were the others. You had different ethnic groups within the Soviet Union. So you would say you're Georgian, you're, Jewish, you're Azerbaijani, Tajik, whatever ethnic group you were a part of. So, yeah. So when people say, "Oh, you're Russian," I always have to, well, actually, and kind of explain
actually.
have that weird
actually,
conversation. Yeah, I hate being that guy of, well, actually. But in those contexts, I do have to resort to that.
These are problems I've never had, thank God. But
Well,
listen,
I would think being in New York, you would have that problem. Walking around New York City, the minute you start talking, people go, "Where are you from?"
yeah, but it gets the biggest smile. Like it's terrible, but for some reason the Irish, it's not terrible. What I mean is we can really take advantage of it.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm from Ireland, gets you in so many doors, man. It's terrible. Like even with the band years ago, we'd support these huge bands. We'd go out before like Van Halen or whatever. And there was always that disappointment because they turn off the lights and the crowd will start screaming. And we're like, oh no, they think it's Van Halen. It's not, it's us. And then there's that I eventually asked the stage guy, I was like, can you not turn the lights off, like dim them slowly as we start to play, because people think that they're finally coming out, and then they're like, oh god, it's a support band. Now, luckily we were a half decent band and we were able to win people over, but our singer would often unfortunately take that cheap move and go, hi, we're Mr. North and we're from Dublin, Ireland, and it would just get an applause for nothing. We haven't played a note yet. We could be the worst band in the world, but everybody would be like, "Oh my god!" So it's just like it's a get out of jail free pass. Apparently, everywhere in the world, like they say that counterfeit passports, the Irish passport is is a top one on that list because it just gets smiles everywhere in the world, except for Britain, of course, right next to us. But everywhere else, in Britain, we're terrorists. We're savages.
I think in the global community, the Irish are that fun guy at the party that everybody likes to kind of hang out around or listen to tell a story, and kind of are like, "Oh, that guy's great. That guy's a good time." In that global community, that's where I place the Irish within that global ecosystem.
Blakely, you're gonna have to do it. You're gonna have to go to Ireland, find your roots, do all that stuff, reconnect.
Yes, I am. And you know what? I'm going to have to remember the things that you said so that it's not so obvious that I'm just like an American when I go over there.
Yeah, I'll give you a list. I'll give you a list of things not to say.
I need to know what not to say, what to say, how to pronounce a few words. So maybe I can just is there anything to do for people who don't drink in Ireland?
Because you're not drinking then anymore.
No, I've been sober for 9 years.
Wow, fantastic. Listen, there's plenty to do. You don't have to drink. One of the guys in that Ireland video, one of my best friends ever, and he's on the radio now a lot there, and I interview him about the immigration thing, actually. Dave, he just never drank. He's just never interested in him, and he's an Irish icon, but he has the best time. There's no problem as long as you're cool, being around people who are drinking.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, now I am. I wasn't when I first got sober, because I wasn't drinking or not drinking because I wasn't interested. It was because I love drinking that I had to stop. I loved it too much that I had to stop. I mean, you can only fall down so many sets of stairs and break your teeth and get kicked out of bars and be in mental institutions before you're like, maybe I can stop.
Yeah.
Being Irish opened a lot of doors there.
Yeah. I would love, actually, what my dream is, aside from going and trying to colonize Ireland and steal someone's house,
Yeah.
aside from that, one of my dreams is to go to Ireland and to make an album there, because I've written music that includes like Irish, parts in it and stuff. I would love to make an album there with all the talented musicians that come out of Ireland.
There's a lot of great
Traditional
musicians.
Irish trad.
Trad.
Yes.
And there's a lot of great studios, in the countryside. These
Yeah,
retreat
that's what I want to
type
do.
studios where you wind up like surrounded by trees and castles and whatever. You
Oh.
can go for walks and contemplate whether the song is working or whether the mix is working or what you've got to do, and talk to your producer and so on, and look at the Irish dawn or sunset or whatever. There's a lot of nice atmosphere there. Some cool studios. A lot of famous artists have recorded over there for that reason. Kate Bush and people like that will go over and just get away from everywhere. The Irish are also very good at leaving famous people alone. They're very good at that. They don't want to bother a famous person. They see Bono on Grafton Street, and they're just like, I'll leave him alone. Sure, he probably gets this all the time. Shush, leave him alone. So
I feel like New Yorkers are pretty good about that too. I see famous people, and A, I don't give a shit. But B, I'm like, they're just living their lives.
Yeah,
in fact,
New York's the second best place.
Yeah, if I see, there's like a lot of like recording that happens in New York for TV shows and stuff, and myself and everybody else, if we see them, we see the actors in the recording, we just walk around. Like we just are like, excuse me.
Yeah, or they're working,
Yeah,
leave them alone. They're working. They're doing their thing. Guys,
that's what I need to do. I need to go and record an album in Ireland.
Yeah, absolutely. Ashford recording studios is one that comes to mind, and then of course there's some famous ones in Dublin where U2 did all their stuff. Guys, the YouTube channel is I Am Blakely. How's it going on YouTube, by the way, Blakely?
It's going good. I mean, certainly
you're huge on TikTok and Instagram.
Oh well, yeah, but the problem is with being big on TikTok and Instagram is that TikTok I get targeted a lot by
What's happening with Michael Rappaport? Yeah, Michael Rappaport. He's got a hard on for you. Sorry.
I can't
he's after you.
Yeah. I am so tired of that cunt. Okay. Coming after me, trolling all my shit. Okay. Going on my page, fucking screen recording my TikToks, then putting it on his loser Twitter. Like, the thing is that TikTok is annoying because it is so easily censored. They'll take videos down like super quick. Yeah. But they're like extra censorious since they started working with the ADL. And every single time I make a parody video about Michael Rappaport's bitch ass or any of those other clowns, they come after it and they take it down. So I just made a video about him yesterday, and I am convinced he was the one who reported it because it got reported. They took it down. I appealed it. They put it back up, and then those bitches took it down again. Like, what? Yeah.
You're getting under his skin. It's a great thing. I mean, it sucks, but you're doing God's work right there. You're getting right under his skin. He's clearly getting freaked out.
I know I am. And that's why I think I'm probably going to start spending even more time on YouTube, because as much as I love TikTok, like TikTok is fun, but I'm so tired of their censorship and their targeting of anybody that talks about Gaza or like anything that's happening. So, and the way they favor people like him, and then will target accounts like mine, especially if I make a parody video about his bitch ass. So I'm probably going to be spending a lot more time just like on YouTube making videos or doing lives, because it's just not nearly as censored. I'll still make TikTok videos, but I just like that there's more freedom on YouTube than there is on TikTok.
Yeah, there is. I hope it goes well for you. I really do. I love your TikTok stuff. It's really, really fun. I'm actually going to bring it to an end, guys, because I've got to go over to the iBashers. We're doing an iBash over on the other side.
Nice.
I wanted to talk more about the Paul Thorpe thing, guys. Everybody who's watching, about the neo-fascism, but I think we covered most of it in what we were talking about there with immigration, and we defined the differences between one and the other and the various different grievances that people have. John, I want to thank you again, as always, for coming on.
Of course, anytime. This
extremely
is really
insightful.
Fun.
Yeah, it was really, really cool. Thank you, man, for putting aside the time.
Yeah,
and I am Blakely, guys. Go check her out. Do you have your Venmo? Is your Venmo I am Blakely? Because I know
Yeah,
that
my
you're
Venmo's
getting.
also I am
Yeah,
Blakely. Yeah,
let's
I made
let's
it.
fight the Rappaport. You know, let's
I
go
haven't,
against.
I haven't
Yeah,
heard that name in years.
yeah, if
Yeah,
you feel inclined, you can donate to my work on Venmo, which is the same name. But also, yes, please follow me on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. It's the same name. And also thank you. Wait, Asheen. Asheen?
Oshin. Yes,
Asheen. Okay. Thank you for having me on again. I had a lot of fun. This is fun.
it's good stuff. Great
Yeah.
conversation, and thanks for coming in on that heavy conversation as well. It's pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah, you definitely lightened the mood there. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Well,
Okay,
it was
guys.
good. It was good talking to you, John. It was interesting to hear a perspective from
Yeah.
somebody who used to work in Border Patrol.
Yeah, take care, guys. Nice
Take
nice
care.
conversation. Nice meeting you, Blakely, and Oshin. Thank you again.
Anybody
right.
watching, just leave it run. If you have auto play on, you'll be knocked over to the Bashers. I'm going to go over and talk to Michaela de Chatillon and Dirk Kennedy. It's going to be a lot of fun. See you guys there.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, people. Bye.